In what can only be described as a stark contrast to the current state of diplomatic finesse demonstrated by King Charles, his great-grandfather, King George V, appeared anything but a statesman. This observation comes from none other than Christopher Wilson, who points out that King Charles, alongside Queen Camilla, returned from a groundbreaking state visit to France with a newfound sense of purpose. The royal couple's trip showcased their potential to enhance Britain's global influence, with plans to promote the nation across the world in the coming months. King Charles has always exhibited an eagerness to explore new territories, with over 100 official visits abroad since his university days in 1970. This stands in stark contrast to his great-grandfather, King George V, who had an aversion to foreign travel so strong that he refused to set foot on foreign soil after turning 60. While King George V may not have been interested in international affairs, he faced a significant diplomatic challenge closer to home. In 1916, during a summons to Buckingham Palace, the Prime Minister muttered, "I wonder what my little German friend has to say to me," referring to his sovereign. King George V was known for being rigid and resistant to advice, regardless of its importance. This attitude persisted during a challenging period in 1916 when Britain's fortunes in France were at their lowest point. As the horrors of trench warfare became known back home, anti-German sentiment soared, leading to riots, assaults on suspected Germans, and the looting of stores with German names. People abandoned their Bach and Beethoven music, and even owners of Dachshunds had their dogs put down as a sign of patriotism. Notably, writer H.G. Wells publicly criticized the monarch's alien and uninspiring court, perceiving it as filled with German relatives who were freeloading. In reality, King George V was essentially German in all but name. None of his 60 first cousins were British, and his wife, Princess Mary of Teck, had German blood and spoke English with a noticeable accent. As the war casualties mounted, grieving families increasingly turned against the royal family, which continued to host foreign relatives using their princely titles. Despite complaints, King George remained steadfast, insisting that his cousin Prince Albert of Schleswig-Holstein was not truly aligned with the Germans, even though the prince oversaw a Berlin prisoner of war camp containing British prisoners. Moreover, one of the king's initial acts was securing the release of Gottlieb's German Band, a popular society act interned at the war's outset. As King George turned 50, he became short-sighted, unyielding, and impervious to criticism. Admiral of the Fleet Lord Jackie Fisher humorously dubbed the king and queen futile and fertile, given that Mary had borne the king's 6 children. Parliament even raised questions about his German relatives. Meanwhile, the enemy drew nearer, launching airstrikes on the British mainland. On June 13, 1917, a fleet of 23 German biplanes conducted their first-ever daylight raid on London, resulting in 162 deaths and 432 injuries, including 16 children at a Poplar primary school. The nation was in shock, especially upon learning that the death-dealing planes were called Gotha IV. Coincidentally, the king's surname was Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. Just 1 month later, Buckingham Palace hastily announced that the British royal family would henceforth be known as the House of Windsor. All royal relatives with foreign titles would renounce them in exchange for British peerages and other honors. This transformation occurred 3 years into World War I, and King George had been slow to act, ignoring public sentiment. Nevertheless, he eventually rectified the situation, allowing Britain to claim a truly homegrown royal family. Many believe that King George could have acted sooner and more decisively, but despite everything, he left behind a legacy that has allowed the House of Windsor, now under King Charles II, to thrive more than a century later. As the saying goes, lessons were learned. Dear friend, if you like everything new about the royal family and don't want to miss all the novelties, subscribe to our channel and like it. By doing so, you take part in our development. We work for you.